많아졌는데 많이 팔아도 남는 건 그전이나 지금이나 별반 차이가 안 나죠.
이렇게 올라보긴 처음이야. 이거 한 가지 힘든 게 아니야, 한두 가지가. 다 힘들어. 다 올랐어. 잠자고 나면 또 오르고 잠자고 나면 또 올라.
아, 올려야 되는데 사람들이 워낙 싸게 먹으려고 그러고 시장이니까 비싸게 팔 수 없으니까 싸게 파는 거야. 싸게 팔고 그러는 거야.
After 2 years of strict social distancing, I thought this was the time for all the streets, restaurants, and food stalls to be booming and lively again. It did at some point, but not as much as I expected. I couldn't say that things were all back to normal again. Wherever we go, we could easily find many food stalls and restaurants that are raising their menu prices. It might not be that welcoming for customers like us, but I thought that will make room for business owners to ramp up their vitality and make money like they did in the past. But meeting owners here and there today, the reality couldn't be more different. For these business owners, raising their menu prices was not a choice, but a necessity just to survive.
The prolonged war in Ukraine is causing a butterfly effect and straining,
and is also warning of even more crippling inflation in the months to come.
The price of palm oil has almost doubled since 2020 due to the war in Ukraine.
The Ministry of Trade and Industry says the food industry has 2 to 4 months worth of stock.
Many of these merchants have been running their businesses for years at this market, but behind the smile they put on to greet their customers lay serious concerns about their livelihoods.
재래시장 찾는 게 싼 맛에 오잖아. 그러니까 통닭값을 우리가 올리질 못했어. 여기는 그저 고구마 더 주세요, 떡 좀 더 주세요. 이 재미로 온 거야, 재래시장은. 그러니까 우리가 여기 그렇게 값을 못 올려.
This is arguably the toughest period that their businesses have ever gone through. Their profit margins have become razor thin amid the rising price of food staples.
이게 지금 배로 오른 거야. 튀김가루도 지금 몇 배가 뛰었어. 13,000원 하던 게 2만 원 다 간 거야. 2만 원이 넘어요, 앞으로.
근데 지금 식용유는 지금은 얼마씩 되는 거예요?
그러니까 문제가 지금 52,000원, 현재. 그거 가지고도 없어요. 없어가지고 내가 필요한 걸 못 가져와요.
한 1년 반 전이나 2년 전까지는 18리터당 25,000원대부터 시작해가지고 계속 주기적으로 뭐 3,000원, 3,000원, 3,000원 계속 이렇게 올라서 지금은 뭐 52,000원, 53,000원, 4,000원까지 가는 상황입니다. 저 사모님 같이 받아 쓰신 분이나 저같이 물건을 받아 서로 다 공급해 주신 분이라 너무나 가격이 폭등하기 때문에 공급도 제대로 안 되면서 서로 다 이제 힘든 상황입니다.
The price for one order of fried chicken at this stall is going for 14,000 won, or roughly $11 US. From raw chicken to flour and cooking oil, the price of some items have jumped twofold over that same period. The stall owner is contemplating a price hike pressured by the soaring cost of food ingredients.
외식 잘 안 하죠. 집에서 사가지고 먹죠. 이 식당 있잖아, 식당. 식당 뭐 7,000원 줘도 밥을 제대로 못 먹어. 차라리 라면 끓여 먹는 게 나아.
뭐든지 올랐어요. 안 오른 게 없어.
그러면 그때마다 기분이 어떠세요? 물가 오르는 거 느끼면서?
살기가 참 힘들다는 생각 들죠. 갈수록.
눈 감았다 뜨면 돈이 올라가는 게 눈으로 보이고 집에 물건을 사 가는 것도 지갑이 텅텅 비어요.
Enjoying a fresh basket of fried chicken and washing it down with beer after work is a small luxury that is frequently enjoyed by millions of ordinary Koreans. But even this modest comfort is coming under threat as eating out has become more expensive due to the rising food prices. Many small business owners have been reluctant to raise their prices, especially those providing affordable menu items, taking on the full burden of rising food costs over fears that a price hike could drive their customers away.
이렇게 올라보긴 처음이야. 다 힘들어. 다 올랐어. 잠자고 나면 또 오르고 잠자고 나면 또 올라. 힘들어도 해야지. 하던 거니까. 그래도 내가 다 오는 사람마다 반겨주고 오는 사람마다 뭐 늙었다고 그래도 뭐 늙어서 안 오면 되는데 그냥 할머니 이모하고 다 찾아오니까 좋지 뭐. 돈 바래고 하는 게 아니야.
Gwangjang Market is a bustling traditional market and a popular destination for both locals and tourists. The merchants here also face similar concerns over the rising cost of food staples, despite looking lively and upbeat as they greeted their customers.
손님은 많아졌는데 이제 음식값이나 뭐 재료값이나 많이 올랐다고 하는데 사장님은 좀 어떠세요?
그러니까 재료값이 손님은 많아졌는데 많이 팔아도 남는 건 그전이나 지금이나 별반 차이가 없습니다.
But says price hikes are out of the question, considering that the business is located in a traditional market.
사장님은 조금 어때요, 요즘 상황이? 좀 음식값을 올려야겠다라는 고민 좀 했을 수 있을 것 같은데.
그럼요. 고민했어요. 이런 회복하던 정도 올려야 되는 거 써놓고는 또 지워버렸어요.
왜 지우셨어요?
왜 지웠는가면 얘를 지어야만이 와서 얘들이 먹던 사람들이 아직 그 가격이 그대로구나. 그런 마음으로 이제 또 와서 이제 먹을 수가 있거든.
Many merchants have voiced their struggles online in an internet cafe for small business owners, with many posts highlighting their dilemma of needing to raise their prices but not being able to do so in actual practice.
What these small stall owners are experiencing is now, unfortunately, very common. For now, they are all fighting to find creative ways to stay open. Many experts are saying the economic outlook is uncertain, and that's a huge concern for many small business owners. Consumer prices are soaring through the roof from the ripple effects of the pandemic and the war. The double whammy of runaway prices and muted economic activity has turned the threat of stagflation into a very real possibility. This has left many low-income individuals, especially those in the developing world, fighting to maintain their livelihoods. According to Statistics Korea, the country's CPI jumped 4.8% in April, the highest margin in well over a decade. CPI measures the price change over time for a basket of goods and services, and is the most common measure of overall consumer prices. What are the main drivers behind the soaring prices of groceries we've been witnessing as of late?
We call it economics imported inflation, by which we mean that the price in Korea has been rising because of external factors, like the soaring prices of corn, soaring prices of wheat. So those imported material price has been rising very much, especially last April. Most of the inflation in Korea has been sourced from outside, and those two forces of outside, external factors, are COVID-19 pandemic. The second one is Ukrainian war.
Back in 2007, which was the third year on my job as a producer, the world was swimming in liquidity. Corporate earnings were generally robust, and the stock market was flying high. It was a period of high growth coupled with low inflation, despite all the liquidity in the market. Former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Henry Paulson described it as strongest global economy he had ever seen in his lifetime. Then the 2008 global financial crisis hit, and everything folded like a house of cards. I witnessed firsthand the ruin of the sense of despair during my business trip to Los Angeles and South America that same year. 15 years have passed since then. Wall Street started off slow as the calendar turned to 2022. And before anyone knew it, Nasdaq had shed 21% for the year by the time April rolled around, completely erasing the gains it made in 2021. Then what is your forecast of Korea's consumer prices over the coming months then?
If you look at the imported inflation history of Korea, we would say that it lasted about 18 months, year and a half. So if that kind of tendency continues this time, we've been experiencing inflation over 3% for about the 6 months. I'm assuming that this inflation above 3% will last at least one more year.
One more year.
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve raised the interest rate by 0.5% in May to fight inflation, and is expected further hike borrowing cost in June and July as well. Goldman Sachs, meanwhile, believes there is a 35% chance of a recession taking place within the next 2 years, while Bloomberg is forecasting a 44% of an economic downturn before January 2024. The dark clouds of recession is not only hovering over the US, but also Europe and the entire globe. Professor Hartwell, price levels are going off the charts. How's the Ukraine war directly impacting daily life of people in European countries?
Well, the only way that they're really feeding through is because of the volatility that comes with kind of oil prices. They've gone up. If you think of kind of West Texas or even Brent crude, it's gone up about 75% since February. So that's an immediate price hike that is hitting people in their pocketbooks, in their wallets. Other than that, food prices are rising, but were rising beforehand. This is just kind of, when you think about the amount of wheat, the amount of grain that comes out of Russia, that comes out of Ukraine, that is going to be problematic in terms of supply chain. So there's going to be less supply, and the demand's going to be the same or higher, so prices are going to be higher. But overall, kind of prices have been rising already because of central bank responses, because of kind of COVID fiscal stimulus. So it's inaccurate to attribute most of this to kind of the Russia-Ukraine war, especially since Russia only accounts for about 3% of the global economy.
Well, thank you, Professor. Very nice talking to you.
Thank you.
The problem is inflation. Imported goods have stopped coming in. Lockdown in Shanghai and Beijing will inevitably paralyze manufacturing and shipping. Around 1 in 5 cargo container ships across the world are currently stuck in port, and China accounts for 30% of them. This created a supply chain backlog and soaring cargo rates. It now costs for more than $15,000 to ship one cargo container from China to the US, compared to $5,900 1 year ago. The added cost of shipping naturally leads to a higher price tag on all kinds of goods, ranging from palm oil to automobiles. The situation was no different for Koreans living in the US, who are also feeling a pinch of soaring consumer prices, paying more for everything from gasoline to groceries and restaurant bills.
I'm having a really difficult time right now. And when I go to Costco, it feels like I'm paying a lot more when I'm not buying as much compared to a year ago. And prices at the Korean market is raised a lot more, so almost double. Like sometimes snack and the milk, Korean milk is too expensive. So in general, everyone is cutting back their own spending right now.
Cooking oil prices in particular have come under the spotlight due to the extreme scale and frequency of the price hikes. What's the reason behind palm oil price surging up?
Demand is booming, but supply of palm oil is not catching up so fast. Indonesian government imposed a ban on palm oil exports for CPO, RBD palm oil, RBD palm oil, and used cooking oil. And this is on top of about 10 million tons of loss of sunflower oil from the Black Sea because of the Ukraine-Russian war. And you must also remember that South American producers of soya beans, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, all had very bad crop this year.
The global shortage of raw materials has also led to panic buying and hoarding in many countries across the world. Because of this, major supermarket chains in the UK have been forced to limit the amount of cooking oil that shoppers can purchase at 2 bottles for each person. Severe cooking oil shortages have also been reported in Spain, Greece, Turkey, and Belgium, among other countries.
Concerns are also mounting in Korea following an export ban on palm oil imposed by Indonesia, a key global supplier of the commodity.
이 식용유지가 직접 우리나라에서 생산되는 게 아니라 다 해외 주산지들에서 수입을 해서 이제 우리가 가공을 해서 이제 사용하는 상황이다 보니 이런 세계적인 상황에 대해서 좀 자유롭지는 않습니다. 이제 3개월 내외 어치의 이제 재고는 보통 확보는 하고 있습니다. 하지만 이제 그건 이제 평시 기준인 거라 이제 뭐 사재기 같은 그런 예상 밖의 상황이 발생하면은 그 부분이 좀 불안하게 될 수가 있고요.
Prices dictate the flow of goods and services. The rising price of oil and fertilizers could put more farms out of business and lead to a lower agricultural yield. That could make the animal feed more costly to the detriment of livestock farmers. It is a chain reaction that finds its way all the way to our dinner table, affecting the price of key staples such as pork, eggs, and milk. The retail price of wheat in Seoul rose roughly 50% recently. Whether you're eating out or cooking at home, there's no escaping the runaway growth in food prices. High inflation puts ordinary Koreans at the greater risk, making their regular trips to the grocery store a more stressful part of their day. Soaring price tags are making consumers think twice about a purchase in front of store shelves nationwide.
너무 많이 올랐죠.
네, 그러면 실제 좀 뭐 구매하는데도 영향이 좀 있겠어요?
그렇죠. 물론이죠. 돈을 뭐 10만 원 생각하고 나도 몇 개 못 사니까 이제 나이가 먹어갖고 수입이 없으니까 좀 뭐 위기감을 느낀다 그러나 좀 불안하죠.
월급은 비슷하잖아요. 그래서 월급에 맞춰서 살아야 되니까 가격 단위를 외워서 사진 찍고 물건을 비교하는데 정말 너무 올라가지고
지금 꼭 살 거 외에는 안 사고 있어요, 지금. 불필요한 거, 먹는 거 이런 거 아주 가장 중요한 것만 빼놓고는 줄이는 수밖에 없어요. 옛날에는 뭐 이제 2개 살 거, 3개 살 거 지금 하나로 딱 필요한 것만. 그냥 우리 이렇게 평범한 이런 중산층 주부들이 어떻게 사냐고. 못 살지. 힘들어서.
Food expenses take up a considerable portion of income for many households here in Korea. Data shows that as of April, the average cost of food to feed a single meal to a family of 4 rose 13% on year in Korea, compared to a year earlier, forcing many households to tighten their purse strings.
밀가루하고 식용유를 원자재로 사용하는 그런 과자라든지 라면이라는 그런 제품류들은 계속 오를 걸로 전망되고 있죠.
그러면 이렇게 식용유 가격이 올랐을 경우에 이게 만약에 장기적으로 갈 경우에는 조금 더 여파가 있을 수도 있겠네요.
식용유 같은 경우에는 지금처럼 가격이 계속 오를 경우에는 다른 전 품목까지 그 가격이 오를 걸로 지금 전망이 되고 있는데, 그렇게 되면은 이제 물가가 많이 오르기 때문에 고객님들이 조금 구매하기 좀 어려우실 것 같다, 좀 구매하기 주저하실 것 같다라는 생각이 듭니다.
Runaway inflation is not only affecting small businesses and average consumers, but also the corporate sector and the wider economy as well.
Higher interest rates always deal the heaviest blow to ordinary citizens who have loans to repay, especially in the developing world. Those less fortunate won't even be able to afford cooking oil to prepare meals for their family. Could rising interest rate trigger a chain reaction of serious repercussion, especially on those who are most vulnerable to soaring inflation, like small business owners, low-income groups, and people in the developing world?
Inflation, as you know, is what we call a regressive taxation. It affects low-income people more than high-income people. Whether it is the United States or whether it's in emerging markets, it's the same. Of course, the difference is that in emerging markets, income is very low to begin with. So because of that, a big chunk of that, by that it could mean 60, 50, 80%, goes for food and energy. I mean, heat, driving to work, and also food. So therefore, there's no income left for other things. So in some low-income countries, that would mean hunger. And again, I mentioned one of these countries is Sri Lanka, which already has a serious problem, has a social unrest, and I'm afraid, by the way.
The Federal Reserve had also moved quickly to hike interest rates in 1995, which indirectly led the Asian financial crisis 2 to 3 years later. Better known as the IMF crisis in Korea, it was one of the most traumatic events in the country's post-war history that is clearly remembered to this very day. The same scenario repeated itself in 2006. High interest rates broke open the subprime mortgage crisis, leading to the 2008 global financial crisis. The warning signs of stagflation are cropping up everywhere in the year 2022. Taming inflation and supporting economic growth are difficult to achieve concurrently. The Fed's goal now is to enable a soft landing, which appears to suggest that the world is either due for a hard crash at worst and a soft landing at best, but not robust growth.
And what's your forecast? What do you see in 1 or 2 years?
So by the end of next year, federal funds rate will be expected to become at least 3%. And in the case of Korea now, we are 1.5%. And we expect that that rate will be at least 2% by the end of this year. One thing for sure is that the Bank of Korea has to raise at least 1.5% for the coming 2 years. So generally, we'll be expecting a rising interest rate, at least 1.5% for the next 2-year period. So we have to expect that the general rise in the interest rate. And if interest goes up, that's going to have a devastating effect upon consumption and also investment. So we are expecting global slowdown in real economic activity.
Despite their struggles, the Martins we met were all trying their best to stay optimistic and take all these challenges in stride.
따뜻하니까 겨울보다는 사람이 좀 분지긴 해. 분지긴 하고 겨울보다는 좀 낫아요. 조금이라도 힘들게 좀 한 줄이 더 서고 조금 덜 벌더라도 손님이 많이 오면 그게 좋잖아요. 그냥 좀 고생하는 같이 살아야지 그리고.
나만 그런 거 아니잖아. 그냥 사는 거야 그렇게. 바람이 있다면 뭐 이제 물건값 좀 내리고 안정이 돼야 그 바람이지 뭐 우리가 한데.
In every country across the world right now, food prices are inching up, but the burden will fall most heavily on the poorest households who spend the majority of their income on food. We'll have to consider ways to tackle the food shortages and prevent the situation from making us powerless again, overwhelmed by the circumstances beyond our control, like the COVID-19 pandemic.
There is no such a thing as a free lunch, as the saying goes. The time of aggressive austerity is on the horizon as governments and central banks begin to win back their massive pandemic stimulus and enter a tightening cycle. Can we weather through the coming storm? With runaway inflation casting a shadow over our economic prospect, we must brace ourselves for a heavy impact.